Hi and welcome to another video. In honor of the Brontëlong that we are going to host, or that we are already hosting I think, because I'm filming this in January but I think I'm going to upload it in February, so by the time you're seeing this the Brontëlong has already started, and if you have joined then welcome. I'm so happy that you're here, and in honor of the Brontëlong I thought I would discuss some Brontë books that I have read and enjoyed, and the list that is way longer, which is the list of the Brontë books that I still want to read. With Brontë books I mean books about the Brontës that aren't written by the Brontës. So think fiction novels about them, so historical fiction, think biographies, more liberal non-fiction books about the Brontës, spin-offs of their novels, so adaptations, anything that has to do with the Brontës that I want to dive into next to reading their own novels. And if you want to do the same, then I have some recommendations of books that I have enjoyed that you may enjoy as well. And then we're going to head over to the TBR part, where I have just scoured the internet looking for the right novels, none of which I own yet. I'm kind of waiting for you guys to tell me which ones are good. We're going to start with one of my favorite Brontë adaptations, which is a graphic novel, Glasstown by Isabel Greenberg. This is a wonderful graphic novel that is based, I'm going to put it down because it's really heavy. It is based on the fantasy stories that the Brontë children, including Bramwell, so the brother of the Brontës, wrote when they were children. They wrote fantasy stories to just keep things entertained because they lived quite remotely, of course. They wrote a lot of epic fantasy stories, and in this graphic novel those fantasy stories are combined with their life, and it's mainly focused on Charlotte Brontë. And what I really like is that in the beginning we meet Charlotte after all her siblings have passed away, and she's talking to one of the characters who sort of comes to life in her life now. So he has a picnic with her, and then together they go back into the past and they go back into the fantasy stories, and it's just beautifully drawn, beautifully told, and I really enjoyed this. I have recently reread it, and that will not be the last reread, I can tell you. Talking of Charlotte Brontë, I also read a letter collection by her, but at the time I borrowed one from the library and they only had a translated one, so I cannot really tell you which collection is the right one. But after doing some research, I would, I think, recommend the letter collection that was collected by Juliet Barker. This is The Brontës Alive in Letters. I will leave a picture down here, and of course all the books and the titles will also be in the description. But Charlotte Brontë was an amazing letter writer. I really enjoyed reading her letters. I think she is so honest and witty in her letters. I think she just had quite a lot of friends, quite a lot of good correspondence. Ellen Nossi being one of her best friends that she met at school, with whom she corresponded a lot. Charlotte letters give just such a beautiful insight into her life and into the loss of Emily and Anne. I think the collection that I'm talking about and that I read also has some of Anne and Emily's letters, but I believe Charlotte destroyed a lot of those after they passed away. So in general I'm going to recommend you read Charlotte letters. After reading her letters I developed quite a difficult relationship with Charlotte Brontë, because in her letters there are a lot of things that I don't agree with, the things she says. Something as simple as that she didn't like Jane Austen, which was hard for me to read about, and I think she wasn't always the friendliest of figures, but of course these are her private letters, so it's not really fair to judge her on the things that she felt free to say in the privacy of a letter. But still I developed a more difficult relationship with Charlotte Brontë, but I think that also increased the fascination for her. If you're really fascinated by Charlotte Brontë, I would definitely recommend that you read her letters. If you are fascinated by Anne Brontë, which I am, then I would recommend you read Take Courage, Anne Brontë and the Art of Life by Samantha Ellis. I love this book so much. This is a very personal and subjective take of Samantha Ellis on Anne Bronte's life. She picks a list of women that Anne Brontë had met that were important to her, and throughout those women, so I think the housekeeper, their mother, Emily and Charlotte of course, she tries to tell part of her life and she tries to explain Anne, because she's always the sister that we know least about, that people I think always see as the third sister, very much as the third sister, which is a shame because there are a lot of unique and very interesting things in her novels. Don't go into this thinking it's biography because Samantha Ellis also talks a lot about herself and about personal things and about her journey through Anne Brontë and about her personal relationship with Anne Brontë. I personally really love that, but I think if you go into this with the expectation that you are going to get a lot of objective information, that's not what you're going to get, but this is a fast and easy read and I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, I haven't yet read a book that is surrounded by Emily, which I really do want to read, so we'll get into that a little bit later. But if you're curious about the Bronte's heritage, about their parents, about where they came from, then this is a book that I read I think 2 years ago now, The Mother of the Brontës by Sharon Wright. And this is about Maria, the mother of the Brontës. I didn't absolutely adore or love this book, but I think it gives such an interesting insight in both their parents, because even though Maria is on the front, there's an entire chapter about Patrick Brontë, their father, as well. And it gave me a lot of background information and a lot of sense of understanding where certain values and where certain ways of thinking came from, because their mother was quite religious and in a very Victorian manner, so her opinions about certain things amongst poverty are not opinions that we would uphold today. And I think those kind of opinions and those kind of views you can definitely, especially in Anne's writing, you can kind of see their mother. And I think in Emily's writing, the harshness of Wuthering Heights sometimes really has a connection to their father's past as well, because he grew up very poor in Ireland and worked his way up in England in university life, which is just fascinating and interesting to read about if you want to connect it to how the Brontës grew up and in what kind of household they became women. This is definitely more a book to read maybe a little bit later in your Brontë journey if you really want to have a deep dive, but it is quite short and it is very readable. I am going to put it as a recommendation. One of my favorite novels is a prequel on Jane Eyre, but of course an imagined prequel because it's not written by Charlotte Brontë, but that is White Circles of Sea by Rhys. Since we're all reading Jane Eyre right now, I'm not going to tell you which characters are in this book because that might be somehow a spoiler for Jane Eyre. Let's just say there are 2 characters from Jane Eyre, and while you're reading Jane Eyre, you know a lot of things have happened before Jane Eyre came into the picture. So this book is about what happened to those 2 characters. It's incredibly fascinating, it's beautifully written, it's not as easy and straightforwardly written as Jane Eyre. It's definitely a bit more modernist writing, but as I personally really enjoy and love that, I really didn't mind. This really explores the role of women and the role of women in a certain class and how women in different classes have a different story and have a different development and a different faith. Basically, it makes you look quite differently at certain characters from Jane Eyre, but I know that some people are hesitant because of that to read this, but I don't think you have to be scared of that. If you've finished Jane Eyre and if you have formed your own opinions, this book will not change it. It's really a fictional take on it, and there's a character in Jane Eyre that doesn't really get a lot of page time, and this book does give that character page time, even though in my mind they're not necessarily the same character because they're of course written by a different author. I really did like that the author was like, I read Jane Eyre and there's something missing and I'm going to fill that gap. Thought it was really interesting in the way that she did that. So that is me being super vague, but if you're watching this and you're reading Jane Eyre, I don't want to spoil that for you. This is definitely something I would recommend if you have some time, if you are really invested to read this after you've read Jane Eyre. So those were my recommendations, or basically the books about the Brontës that I've read. So let's head over to my computer and let's look at the list I made of all the books that I'm interested in. I have made a collection of 9 books that I would like to read about the Brontës. It has biographies, it has novelizations of their life, adaptations, a children's book as well, a picture book. So let's start with what I believe, after doing some research online, is the biography of biographies, and that is The Brontës by Juliet Barker. I think Juliet Barker is someone who also works at the Brontë Museum, so I think she's quite highly acclaimed. And what I know of this is that it's really big. The hardcover is 1003 pages, but that it is really extensive, really detailed. It was first published in 1995. I have put this on my wishlist and I hope, this is just a plan, to read this book over the course of the Brontëlong. So I'm not going to start it just yet because I haven't bought it yet, but I think I will start it around the spring and I hope to read it just a bedside table book throughout the spring and the summer, and just whilst I'm reading the novels to also get to know the Brontës in great details. That is a wild plan. Since it's 1000 pages, I'm giving myself months and months to read it. I will leave the list. I made a Goodreads list of all these books. I will leave the link to that list down below if you want to have a little browse yourself as well. Another one, I think this is also a non-fiction. It is called The Brontë Cabinet 3 Lives in 9 Objects by Deborah Lutz. In this unique and loving detailed biography of a literary family that has enthralled readers for nearly 2 centuries, Victorian literature scholar Deborah Lutz illuminates the complex and fascinating lives of the Brontës throughout the things they wore, stitched, wrote on and inscribed. This sounds fascinating. I have a fascination for just objects that people used to use. It's so interesting to me to know what kind of objects people had in their houses, what objects people would use on a daily basis, what objects were important to people. I think it says so much about you, or not, or it just says something about the time you live in. So I'm really interested in the kind of take that this book is going to have on stuff and how stuff was important to the Brontës. It is a bit of a thinner novel. It is 352 pages and it's quite a recent one. It was first published in 2015. Okay, and then I think one of the only books that really features Emily Brontë as well that I could find, if you have like a really Emily focused book, like the letters from Charlotte or Take Courage from Anne Brontë, I would love to know. But this is one I found that seemed quite interesting. It is called A Secret Sisterhood, the literary friendship of Jane Austen, Charlotte Brontë, George Eliot and Virginia Woolf. Just tick, 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 tick. I love them all. It's written by Emily Midorikawa and Emma Claire Sweeney. Male literary friendships are the stuff of legend. Think Byron and Shelley, Fitzgerald and Hemingway. But the world's best loved female authors are usually mythologized as solitary eccentrics and isolated geniuses. I think that's true. Co-authors and real-life friends Emily Midorikawa and Emma Claire Sweeney proved this wrong, thanks to their discovery of a wealth of surprising collaboration. Oh, so this is about Charlotte Brontë. Damn, I thought this was about Emily. Okay, nevertheless, it still sounds really fascinating. Yeah, let's see what this brings. So, and then I have a few fictionalized versions. So, The Brontës Children of the Moors, which is a children's picture book by Mick Manning. I think it's illustrated by Britta Granstorm. A highly illustrated retelling of the Brontë sisters' life in Haworth in Yorkshire Dales from Charlotte Bronte's point of view. So that sounds incredibly cute. The cover is really cute as well. I don't know if I can get hold of this, but if I can, I'll read it. This is a novel about Emily Brontë. The World Within, a novel of Emily Brontë. Emily Brontë loves her sisters, responsible Charlotte and quiet Anne, and her brother Branwell. She loves the moors that stretch all around her home and the village of Haworth, and she loves wandering over them even in the worst of weather. Most of all, she loves the writing that she and her siblings share, creating imagery kingdoms, vivid characters and exciting adventures. But change comes to the family when their beloved father falls ill and Emily's happy, isolated world crumbles. Charlotte is sent away to school, where she meets new friends and new ideas. Branwell is growing up and becoming absorbed in his own concerns with no time for little sisters. And even dependable Anne, in the end, lets Emily down. She is left alone to face her enemies, old insecurities from the past that haunt Emily and threaten to overwhelm her. I think it's quite interesting because I've always focused on the sisters who went away, Charlotte at school. That's always been the thing that was most interesting to me. More interesting than what would happen to Emily when she stayed at home, because I do know that she suffered from a lot of homesickness and that she didn't like to be away from home. I don't know if this will be a very good novel because it does sound very on the nose, everything, but who knows, we can still give it a go. And then another one, also a novelization. Romancing Miss Brontë. During the 2 years that she studied in Brussels, Charlotte had a taste of life's splendors, travel, literature and art. Now back home in the Yorkshire moors, duty-bound to a blind father and an alcoholic brother, an ambitious Charlotte refuses to sink into hopelessness. With her sisters Emily and Anne, Charlotte conceives a plan to earn money and pursue a dream. The Brontës will publish. In childhood, the Brontës children created fantastical imaginary world. Now the sisters craft novels quite unlike anything written before, transforming her loneliness and personal sorrow into a triumph of literary art. Charlotte pens her 1847 masterpiece, Jane Eyre. This one sounds a little bit better than the previous one. If you've read it, especially if you've read the novels, let me know if they're like worth your time. Okay, we have another Charlotte one. So this is The Secret Diaries of Charlotte Brontë by Syrie James, which is, as far as I can see now, a romance novel. Though poor, plain and unconnected, Charlotte Brontë possesses a deeply passionate side which she reveals only in her writings, creating Jane Eyre and other novels that stand among literature's most beloved works. Living a secluded life in the wilds of Yorkshire with her sisters Emily and Anne, their drug-addicted brother, an erratic father who is going blind. Oh, it's always the same, I mean, come on! Get a different angle, people. But in the pages of her diary where Charlotte exposes her deepest feelings and desires and the truth about her life, its triumphs and shattering disappointments, disappointments, her family, the inspiration behind her work, her scandalous secret passion for the man she never can have, and her intense romantic relationship with the man she comes to love. The anemic author Belle Nichols. It says here that it blends historical fact and fiction. It is Charlotte's story just as she might have written it herself, so it is fiction. I really don't like it when the blur of the book kind of insinuates that it's real, that she wrote it herself, and then in the end it says, just as she might have written it herself. She didn't. You did, Syrie James. Let's not get sassy. Okay, and then we have one, the biggest gamble, I think. This is a series of mystery novels, and I think the main characters are the Brontës. So let's see. It is The Vanishing Bride Brontë Series Mystery Part 1. Before they became legendary writers, Charlotte Brontë, Emily Brontë and Anne Brontë were detectives in this charming historical mystery. Oh my gosh. I already love this. Yorkshire. 1845. A young wife and mother has gone missing from her home, leaving behind 2 small children and a large pool of blood. Oh no. Just a few miles away, a humble parson's daughter, the Brontë sisters, learn of the crime. Charlotte, Emily and Anne Brontë are horrified and intrigued by the mysterious disappearance. As they investigate, Charlotte, Emily and Anne are confronted with a society that believes a woman's place is in the home, not scouring the countryside looking for clues. Oh no. But nothing will stop the sisters from discovering what happened to the vanished bride, even if they find their own lives in great peril. Oh, I love this. So it's quite a thin book. It's 293 pages and it was published recently in 2019. It is quite well reviewed. It has a lot of ratings and it has almost an average of 4 stars. That is pretty good. If you've read this, let me know. I don't mind if it's a bit cheesy or predictable. I just need the writing to be a little bit decent and then I will go for this. I will. So those are some Brontë novels that I found that piqued my interest. If I need to add anything to this list, please leave it down in the comments. And if you leave a comment, I will add it to the Goodreads list so other people can see your recommendation as well. And I will share it in the Discord as well so we can all have a Brontë obsession party if you want to join that one. If you're reading Jane Eyre right now, I hope you are enjoying it. I hope you're having a great time and I will probably see you in the Jane Eyre live show. So have a lovely day, have a lovely evening wherever you are, and yeah, I hope to see you in a live show or in another video. Doei!